समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया?
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
A high-ranking official in the Trump administration has said that because Prime Minister Modi did not make a personal phone call to President Trump, the Indo-US trade deal's fate is hanging in the balance. After Trump's attack on Venezuela and his threatened attack on a series of other countries, including an invasion possibly or a takeover of Greenland, intervention in Iran, and interventions in Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, the question must be asked, in Trump's age and in a changing world order, how should India respond? There was a time when the West saw India as a countervailing and balancing force to the rise and rise of China. But is Trump looking to cut a deal with China? And if that happens, what does it mean for India's security concerns? In a moment from now, we'll be talking to one of India's foremost strategic affairs brains, Professor C. Raja Mohan. He's also, of course, the author of a new book that looks at India and the rebalancing of Asia. I'm Barkha, you're with the Mojo story. On the program today, in the age of Trump, the world is changing and changing fast. Can the Indo-US relationship survive the age of Trump? Can India respond in a way that is to our advantage, even while Trump still has 2 more years at least to go in office? Today, a key Trump official claims that it's because Prime Minister Modi did not make a personal phone call to President Trump that the trade deal's future now hangs in the balance. Remember, the Indo-US trade deal has still not been completed. There is a legislation in the United States of America that is threatening 500% tariffs. There's also a critical decision expected by US courts on whether Trump's tariffs are legal. But be that as it may, right now, Trump's tariffs are hurting India and India's interests. It has long been argued that India is of particular strategic importance to America because of a shared concern about the rise and rise of China. But is that still the case? As Trump rips through the rules-based orders textbook as we understand it, what happens here to our security concerns? C. Raja Mohan is the author of a new book on India and the rebalancing of Asia. He's also, of course, one of the country's foremost strategic affairs experts. He joins us now. Dr. Raja Mohan, let's bring him up now. Dr. Raja Mohan, it's always a pleasure. Congratulations on your new book. I've been reading it carefully. It still does hold as a central premise that both Washington and Delhi have at least one thing in common, which is central to both countries' security concerns, and that is to not allow Beijing a sort of uncontested rise. There are now questions being raised about that premise. There are people who are suggesting that after Trump's attack on Venezuela, China could take its cue, go for Taiwan next. Maybe Trump will just look the other way and so on. So I want you first to talk about the central premise. The very idea of rebalancing Asia, to borrow the title of your book, is based on the presumption that the West and Washington in particular still care about that countervailing balance. So talk about that.
Absolutely, Barkha, I think you're right. I mean, last 1 year has raised questions about so many presumptions on how we think about the world, whether it's a rules-based international order, the importance of multilateral trading system, and the role of collective institutions of the kind that we built, Quad, etc. And I think what my book does, of course, is to take you to the story of the last 25 years, how the premise that India and the US share a common interest in balancing Asia against a assertive and rising China, and how that premise brought India and US closer. Now, you can say last 1 year, The indications are completely to the contrary. In fact, it's very interesting that it is Trump won between 2017 and 2021, which actually laid the foundations for a stronger military partnership with India, for reorganizing the Quad, to talk about the Indo-Pacific. In some ways, he'd really taken it very much forward. And then we had the Biden double down on it. Now, I think there are two ways of looking at the situation now. That the last 1 year means everything has changed, and that the US and China are going to do a G2, which is...
And has everything changed? According to you, has everything changed?
My sense is the fundamental contradiction between a rising power China, which challenges American dominance, that contradiction between the two has not disappeared. What we're seeing today, I think, Trump feels so powerful, that the US is so strong, that it can actually engage with Russia and China on its own terms, and that he can actually ignore everybody else. But my sense is reality will come calling. My sense is Trump, for all its deference to Xi Jinping in recent years, has not stopped arming Taiwan, has not stopped from putting sanctions. So if I was sitting in Beijing, I'm not going to believe that Trump is going to be my friend. So for India, I think it is a time to hold your horses, keep your head down, and to make up for the uncertainty in the external environment, to make yourself strong, hoping that in the situations that we're going to come, we'll be in a better position to play the balancing game in Asia.
So a lot of questions, but let's start with the latest development from the world of news, which is, America now saying that because Modi did not make a personal phone call to Donald Trump, that's what made the difference between the trade deal going through and not going through. Just going to play out this comment by Howard Lutnick and come right back. Take a look.
Tracks and set the whole deal up. But let's be clear. It's his deal.
Yeah.
Okay. He's the closer. He does the deal. So I said, you got to have Modi. It's all set up. You have to have Modi call the president. And they were uncomfortable doing it. So Modi didn't call.
Wow.
So that Friday left. Middle of the next week, we did Indonesia, the Philippines, right? Vietnam. We announced a whole bunch of deals.
Malaysia in that period.
So we did these whole bunch of deals. So that's like...
That staircase.
And they were and because we negotiated them and assumed India was going to be done before them, I had negotiated them at a higher rate. So now the problem is the deals came out at a higher rate.
Right.
And then India calls back and says, oh, okay, we're ready. I said, ready for what?
Now, Raja, what this actually raises is the question over whether foreign policy is institutional anymore, or it's completely driven by an individual. And the reason I'm asking you this is your book argues that you believe, and you're still optimistic, that relations between India and the United States will outlast whatever bumps in the road that the two countries are experiencing at this moment. But when you actually have a high-ranking official in the Trump administration saying that the trade deal fell through because the Prime Minister did not make a personal phone call, what you're really talking about, and this is happening after Operation Sindoor, and in both cases, it's been about a slighted ego. What you're really talking about is less institutional collisions and more individual whims. How does India's foreign policy, tackle that?
Look, I think this is extraordinarily, a different moment in the United States. The US had a deep and wide system of internal consultation, the whole bureaucratic process of how they relate to the rest of the world and how policies get made. And I think Trump has simply junked that entire structure unilaterally. I mean, not just, unilaterally in terms of externally, but internally. You've seen his cabinet meetings where the cabinet members are fawning on him. It's like a small tin pot dictatorship where the cabinet members are publicly in front of the cameras praising how great the dear leader is doing. Now, that is the reality out there at this point of time. Now, if you ask me, is this going to be a permanent situation in Washington? I don't believe that's going to be the situation. And I think we have to pass through the storm at this point where an egotistic, leader who says, look, only thing that bothers him is his own morality, and that he's not constrained by multilateralism. He's not constrained by his own constitution. He's not constrained by precedent of his own American history. America is going to celebrate 250 years of independence this year. So this is not a normal times in Washington. So I think what the Lutnick saying is right or wrong. But the fact everyone knows that it is completely personalized administration where the principals, let alone the deputies, have much of a role. And I think that's the reality. The question is, how do we deal with it? Then it becomes, what are the costs and benefits for us in terms of engaging this leader? Because don't forget, in 2017 to 21, in Trump's first term, Modi and Trump had very good relationship. It was Mr. Modi who said, "Ab ki baar Trump sarkar," when Trump was facing his second election. So I think from that, we're finding ourselves now in an unusual situation. The question, I think, now with the new ambassador designate coming here, we have, I think, a moment here to take a fresh look at the relationship and to see where we are and how we go forward.
So let me ask you this. One of the sentences in your book that leapt out at me is that India has held its nerve and not been drawn into public argumentation with Trump. This is straight from your book. There are two views on this. One is there's nothing to be gained by arguing with him, at least not in public. And the other is that there has to be a line that you draw because, for example, when Trump does loose talk and he says, Prime Minister Modi called me and he said, "Sir, may I have a word, please?" And then proceeds into some factually completely incorrect claim about Apache helicopters that have all actually been delivered in December. It is annoying, and some may even say it is insulting. You say it is wiser to not be drawn into public argumentation. Why do you think that?
Because of the stakes that you have. I mean, you have a $250 billion trade with the US. So for Indian side, at least, we should not treat it as an issue of personal insult or of egotism. That what happens in the trade relationship with the US affects your shrimp farmers from Andhra Pradesh, your textile workers from Tamil Nadu, your diamond workers from Surat. So there are real people with real interests that are out there who get affected by this. And we have actually, if we're talking about a 500% tariff. So I think the stakes are very high for Indian people. So I think we got to keep that in mind. In the end, leadership is not a personal quarrel, however much Trump might make it. The rest of the world, and I think we got to take this. What are our long-term interests? How do we manage this very difficult situation where the personalized administration, how do we deal with it? I think so far, we've held our patience. We've tried to be responsible. But my sense is if it goes on, you are right, if it keeps going on for another few months, where the tariffs remain or we're going to get more tariffs, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for PM Modi to say, look, we'll just turn our back on this or go back to the Indian style of passive resistance. You're not yielding ground on the actual negotiation. But you're not, succumbing to him, but you're also not defying him. So I think there's one way of thinking about it. But my sense is we have a moment here, next few weeks, whether we take a call and say, look, what is at stake? How do we make sure that 25 years of investment we made in this relationship is not burnt on the question of egotism?
Yeah. Let's come to this rebalancing of Asia that is the central theme of your book. You talk about India as the balancer. India can be a balancer only if that remains intrinsic to Washington's philosophy. We can't be a balancer on our own right now. It would be a question of capacity, and we may not have that capacity to, on our own, be the great balancer of Asia. So let's start with the Quad. At some point, you draw the difference between, Trump and Biden on the Quad, and how Trump, in his first term, may have hoped for a kind of military-style alliance, for the Quad to be, for example, like Asia's NATO. India has, of course, never agreed ever to be part of any military alliance, and that remained the case. But do you think there's merit that there was some military cooperation between India and the US in terms of sort of the maritime exercises and so on? Where does the Quad stand today, according to you, in Trump 2.0, where the Indo-Pacific emphasis is not his emphasis, and his entire emphasis, as he himself says, is on his own Western Hemisphere?
Look, I think, where we are is first two parts to it. I mean, one is the larger question of balance. Second is the question of the Quad. I think on the question of balance, I might say, look, it is India's karma to balance China. Now, you can say, look, we can be buddies, and I think we've repeatedly tried we can be buddies, but the gap between India and China today is so large. China's economy is 5 times bigger than ours. Its military is 4 times bigger than ours. And we have this unsettled boundary of nearly 3,500 kilometers long. So in that reality, the question is, if America is not with us, that problem of balancing China doesn't disappear. Now, if the US is not going to be a partner, we have to find other ways of balancing China. If you go back to in the past, Americans and the Chinese were on the same side. We used to complain, but we turned to Russia to balance US and China. In fact, India was much weaker then. So I think we got to wait for the circumstances to play out, rather than simply saying, if the US leaves us, we're just going to disappear. We don't. I think we are a large country. We have large problems as well. If the US works with us, it's fine. But the US does not work. The question then becomes, how do we find ways of balancing China? And I think what we've seen in the last 6 months is really the focus on internal reform, that you cannot simply depend on American support to balance China. Therefore, you're trying to improve your business environment. You're trying to draw more investments. You're trying to open up your technology sector. You're emphasizing defense self-reliance. I think these need to be accelerated and wait for a positive environment to emerge externally. But till then, the more you do for yourself at home, your ability to play the uncertain game outside will get better. In terms of Quad, again, I would say we should wait to see whether they want to play it or not. But I think what we've seen happen in the last 6 months again is India is improving its ties with Japan, with Australia. So it's not just we that are being, shall we say, dissed around by Trump. Japan had to pay $550 billion to keep the relationship. South Korea had to pay $300 billion to keep the relationship. So I think the US pushing around everyone, countries of US allies. So we're not an ally. See how it treats Europe, or how it treats Britain, how it's treating Japan. So my sense is, unintendedly, this opens up space for India to work with other US allies, either bilaterally or trilaterally. And I think one reason why the Europeans are coming here with high hopes, we have the German Chancellor next week. We have the European leadership here for the Republic Day. So look out for other partnerships. Do more with Europe, do more with Japan, do more with South Korea, do more with Australia. So I think that's what we're trying to do. There are problems with the Americans. At this point, the question is, for that, step up at home and look for new partnerships so that we're not, a little bit left in the wood.
Now, for the rebalancing of Asia, it isn't only about balancing, China's sort of untrammeled rise. It is also about being able to contain adversarial relations with the immediate neighborhood. And your book looks in part at American policy on Pakistan. And there is a long history that the book chronicles, but you speak importantly about how America has finally stopped its sort of activism on Kashmir. And you recount the time that Trump stood, quote unquote, solidly behind New Delhi. This is, of course, after the abrogation of Article 370, when China was pushing for this to become an issue at the United Nations. And you write about how Trump really backed Delhi at that point, and that was a big turning point in the relationship. But let's talk about today, when everything is very transactional in Trump 2.0, when, as you said, he's even mocking his own allies. There is a certain sort of cozying up that the Pakistanis have managed with Trump, whether by paying their way through lobbying firms. We now have the details of those filings, or for other reasons. Today, how does that stand? Today, is there a concern that Washington, under this Trump administration, could revive that activism, or is Trump not interested in all that at all?
Look, I think in terms of pure structural facts, I think there is certainly Trump is playing with his favorite field marshal, and they want various things to be taken from Pakistan, whether it is the mining, so-called rare earths or other materials from Pakistan, oil. But I think if you look back at the US relationship with Pakistan under Ayub Khan in the 60s, you had General Ziaul Haq, you have Musharraf in the 2000s, which you have covered him so extensively. Compared to the state of the relationship between US and Pakistan at the time, what we're having is really pretty limited. what have we seen in the last 1 year? I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about friendship. In fact, he's demanding that Pakistan send troops to disarm Hamas in Gaza. He's saying, I'll take your natural resources. He says, I'm going to give you maybe a little bit of military assistance, but it is not the kind of relationship that we saw, say, during Musharraf's time when Pakistan was the frontline state in the war on terror. Today, that's not the situation. A second thing that has changed is today India's economy is 10 times bigger than Pakistan's. So I think Pakistan gets a goat, but I think we should not end up, self-hyphenating ourselves with Pakistan. That we've seen worse between US and Pakistan in the past. So I think we should let this, as long as we get our own relationship with the US in order, I don't see Pakistan creating, that Pakistan relationship with the US is going to fundamentally alter the equation in South Asia. But I would really worry the day Pakistan grows at 6%.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Today they're barely growing at 3%. The population is growing faster. Pakistan, like Iran, is one of the few countries in the world where the per capita income of people in Pakistan has gone down in the last 20 years. So I think it's really, we must make sure that we manage Pakistan. We take the leadership in the region. That is the one way of keeping Americans and the Chinese out. So I would say not to get rattled by what's happening between them. But I think we've seen phases in which India itself has taken leadership of the region. And I think that's what we need to do.
Since you've mentioned Iran, I must talk about what's happening in Iran. We are seeing massive protests. There is some sense that this could be an inflection point. It could lead to the fall of this regime. Trump has gone on record to say that if the protesters are harmed, he will make an intervention. There are all kinds of implications, for the entire region and the entire world, given that Iran is linked directly to what happens in the Middle East or West Asia, as we call it. How do you see the impact of Iran and what happens next on a rebalanced Asia?
Yeah. But I must tell something personal here. I mean, I think I saw the earlier Iranian revolution, 78, 79. We were all students in JNU, and I think we used to get all the Iranian students from all over the country to come and protest in Delhi against the Shah of Iran. There were leftists, socialists, Islamists, you name it, Democrats, a whole bunch of people who brought a revolution in Iran in 78, 79. What they got at the end of it was the Democrats of the revolution were crushed. You had a religious nationalist regime that took over. Essentially clerics or mullahs who chose to rule that country and put down the rest of the society. So I think one thing is to see everything through anti-American terms, America versus Iran. Another is to see the kind of regimes that have treated their people so badly. I think the Islamic Republic has been a disastrous government internally for the people of Iran. It's also been one that has tried to destabilize the region, whether it's the Gulf Arab states, whether it is across the Middle East, saying they're going to be more Arab than the Arabs. They're going to be more Islamic than most Islamic countries. And I think it's been a disastrous regime. Now, I think we don't have to be government or doing diplomacy with Iran. But as objectively, I think this Islamic Republic is today very unpopular with its own people. So I don't think Iranian people are, we should be shedding a tear for the Islamic Republic. Now, the question then becomes, there is internal anger, there's a revolution happening. And the question is how the rest of the world takes advantage of it, which is where I think we got to be prepared for more fundamental changes within Iran. Because ideally for us, a democratic, secular Iran next door would be a powerful force for fighting many of the dangerous tendencies that we've seen since the launch of the Islamic Republic. 79, when Islamic Republic, Iran, Khomeini took over, it has affected the whole region. It has legitimized radical Islam. It has created reactions to that in other countries. So I would say, if the people of Iran change the regime, I think it'll be good. But the danger, of course, is how do Americans and others take advantage of it?
Let me ask you in the end about China, which is actually at the heart of your book. I think it's quite clear that you regard China as the biggest threat to India, notwithstanding the friction that India and the United States are going through. Now, here is a very peculiar sort of set of paradoxes. You have Pakistan cozying up to the Americans while being a vassal state of China. You have Trump, either conceiving of a G2 world or trying to undermine China. It is even believed that his attention on Greenland is to capture minerals that will help America overtake China. You have China, in a way, dominating Chinese goods, dominating our markets in a way that our economic policy in the past has allowed that to happen, but it has given China heft in the Indian markets, even domination in some sectors. How should India handle China? Because, as you mentioned, the border dispute necessitates a certain amount of rapprochement, and yet you see China as the biggest threat.
It's absolutely the paradox, Barkha. China is a big neighbor. As I said, look, we're not going to disappear. Either of us are not going to disappear. Ideally, that we need a peaceful, friendly, neighborly relationship. Now, if you go back to Nehru started with this assumption. In fact, he was willing to alienate the United States in the 1950s to befriend China. But unfortunately, I think our assessments of China went wrong. You have actually a border dispute still remains unresolved. While we were being, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, we became very anti-American. And, you had Chinese from being very anti-American, even more anti-American than India, and become America's best friends. They used American capital, American technology to rise. And today, the second most important country, a second largest economy with 35% of the world's manufacturing and a $300 billion defense budget. That's where we are. So I think for us, the question then becomes, we want friendly relationship, but this can't be on China's terms. If China says, look, give me Arunachal Pradesh, I'll give you peace. Are we ready to take it? So I think our dilemmas with China are, one, as a large neighbor with a large boundary, we need to have a reasonable and peaceful relationship with them. But at the same time, Chinese power is radiating into the subcontinent. As you said, with Pakistan, with Bangladesh, you name it. So therefore, I think the answer to this is, one, build yourself up, limit your conflict with your other neighbors, try and work with the US, whoever is willing to work with you, to produce a new balance. And I think in that, all the three components, internal strength, regional reconciliation, and great power politics, we'll have to play all that to a reasonable level so that we get some leverage in our negotiation with China.
So do you think it's been a mistake that, when we talk about rebalancing Asia, the reverse rebalancing also happens sometimes? So, for example, when all of these problems were happening with Washington, Modi made a very distinct decision to attend the SCO summit, and those images of Modi with Putin and Xi Jinping were viral, and they finally actually got the attention of the Western media on what was happening between India and the US. But this could also be seen as a sort of reverse rebalancing, that maybe we cannot afford too much friction with China. China is the central paradox in a way of our foreign policy.
Absolutely. Look, I think that photo op was a smart move to draw attention. But your problems with China have not been resolved, nor your idea that Russia will be your salvaging element. If it is going to come up with 500% tariffs, how you relate to Russia will remain a challenge. Therefore, for us, I think we need to keep an open-ended foreign policy where try to see what China can do for us, what we can do for them. And what we are saying today is, as long as the border is peaceful, we're going to take a fresh look at the economic relationship. In the last few days, we've seen notices. India is going to lift some of the restrictions against Chinese investment where it suits us.
I was just going to ask you that, do you think that's a good idea? Because you see, China can control, China exerts control also through economics.
Exactly. In fact, this is the second paradox. What we talked about the border was one. China today controls 40% of the world's manufacturing. Now, you want to do solar, you depend on the Chinese solar cells. You want to do EVs, you depend on Chinese batteries. You want to do any manufacturing good, all the intermediaries come from China. That's a reality. Now, the question is, how do you manage the reality? Here again, two components. One, build up your own domestic, when we talk about the PLI or self-reliance, that's one part. Second is, on a case-by-case basis, see where in the non-strategic sectors, you can get Chinese investment, because the Galwan was a different moment. And today, if you say, look, there's some investment can specifically benefit India, take that. So this needs a very calibrated, careful management, because I think we allowed ourselves to fall so much behind China, lose much of our manufacturing capacity. So I think restoring that, and in the transition period, How do we keep the relationship stable? And to see where there might be points of opportunity for us in engaging China, which is what we take. But of course, China has a veto of what it does. They have a say in what goes on, and they're much more powerful today. So I think it's going to be a test for India's diplomatic skill.
All right, we leave it there. I think India's central paradox is actually not how to handle Trump, but how to handle Beijing. How do you sort of resolve that central contradiction while still keeping your security interests intact? This is something I think you address in your book, which is, of course, looking at India and rebalancing Asia. Professor Rajamohan, always learn so much from you. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Barkha. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.